Reuters is expanding a lot in Nigeria at the moment. There's a huge amount of interest, not only locally, but internationally in Nigerian financial markets, in the prospects for those markets. And that means that we're providing a lot more news and data to be able to serve the people, the financial professionals who are working in those markets, whether that's money markets, whether that's bond markets, whether that's the stock market, which may have sort of gone through a very substantial fall over the past couple of years, but is one where a large number of people are expecting things to pick up. One of the things that we started most recently is to have live stock exchange prices, which go out to the terminals of Reuters clients, not only in Nigeria, but in the rest of the world too, which makes it much easier to be able to trade those markets. There's more data that people are getting on bonds in Nigeria. Well, there are more bond issues. There's a growing bond market. And at the same time as that, I mean, we're providing not just the news that we've always provided from Nigeria, but we've really stepped up our coverage of business and financial news. So we did, I mean, for instance, in the last year we did something like 80% more business stories than we've done in the year before. And a lot of that is exclusive news and things as well, news that people can't get elsewhere. Plus, on top of that, of course, people are interested in the political situation, people are interested in what's happening in the Niger Delta, people are interested in what's happening with the oil industry. And not only within Nigeria, not only as sort of financial markets grow within Nigeria, but as the interest grows from outside Nigeria, there's a lot more demand for that news. And that news is what we're really helping to be able to provide so that people can trade and so that people can invest in Nigeria. So we're providing a lot for those people, and this has been a big area of expansion. In fact, it's not only Nigeria, it's also Africa as a whole, where we've increased the number of correspondents. We've increased the attention that the region's getting generally. But Nigeria is a very big part of that. I mean, anybody from outside who's interested in looking at Africa has to be looking at Nigeria as a very important part of that.
Okay. So is that the way by which Reuters is giving back, or how can I say how is Reuters giving back to?
Well, I think what Reuters is doing is providing an incredibly useful service in this sense. Information is something which isn't always as easy to come by as people might want. There's a huge appetite for data from here, for instance. From Nigeria, people want economic data. They want to know how the economy is going to be doing. They want to know what inflation is going to be. They want to know what oil production is going to be doing. They want to know where the naira is going to be, where the stock market is going to be. And one of the ways that we're sort of helping to develop that side is that where you don't necessarily have all the official indicators, what we're doing is we're also sort of polling analysts to get their expectations, which gives a real guide for people. I mean, it's treating Nigeria in exactly the same way as we would with a developed, with a more developed country, with one of the industrialized countries, I should say. We're carrying out the same sort of level of economic polling and things, so that you get forecasts, realistic forecasts for what's likely to happen. So I think actually the news in itself is in a sense something which is vital. I mean, information is vital for people who are interested in coming to this country as portfolio investors or as direct investors, and it's helping to develop markets locally. But as Reuters, we also have programs which particularly work to develop journalism. I've been a Reuters journalist now, having started working for Reuters in Nigeria in 1995. One of the things which has always attracted me to Reuters, one of the things I've always believed in, is our standards, in our values, in our integrity, in the importance of our independence and our freedom from bias. So those are things that we also want to be able to share with others, that we want to be able to help other journalists, not only in Africa but in other parts of the world, to develop their skills, to be able to meet their potential, to be able to report as fairly and as accurately as possible, which is why we have programs run through the Thomson Reuters Foundation as well, which involve workshops, sometimes run in Nigeria or elsewhere in Africa, sometimes run abroad, sometimes in London, sometimes elsewhere. We also have scholarship programs. For instance, we have recently, there's actually somebody from this publication, Ruana Abroko, who's gone to Johannesburg, who was the winner of the Fitzgerald Prize for young African journalists, to help develop young African journalists. And we also run other scholarship programs in South Africa. We help people through internships sometimes as well. For instance, we have a youth corporal working for us at the moment in Lagos. But we're very dedicated to being able to sort of give something back in this part of the world too. Reuters has been in Africa for more than 100 years, and it's very important to us that we're not just that we're not a company, that we're a company which doesn't just report about these countries, but whose reporters come from these countries. And it's the same goes across the rest of the world too. We want to make sure that we've got a diverse journalistic group of people. We don't want everybody to be from one particular group. People have different perspectives, and it's vitally important that we get that and the understanding, as well as things like the contacts and so on too in our own workforce. But through some of these other initiatives, we're also helping to develop journalism on the continent, and to develop journalists, to help people to develop their talents to the full.
You mentioned that REUTERS has been in Africa for over 100 years. How long has it been in Nigeria?
It's been in Nigeria for certainly not much less than that. I can't give you an exact date.
Not less than 100?
I can't give you an exact date, but I mean, as far as my understanding is, and I'd have to check my facts here actually, but that Reuters was here before Nigeria was Nigeria, and when it was still the northern and southern areas, and before it, well, I mean, not only before independence, but before, during colonial rule, it became Nigeria rather than the sort of the northern territories and the northern southern protectorate and oil rivers and so on. But it's been but for a very long time. Yeah, long before independence.
Okay, you said you recorded 8% more business news than you did ever. What's the reason for that? Is it that there's more?
Well, a lot of it is that there's a lot more demand. There's growing demand for more business news, both within Nigeria and outside. We appointed an extra correspondent to be covering specifically business news, and to be trying to get some more depth about what's actually going on with companies, what's going on with the markets. Certainly one of the things that investors, when they come here, want is to find out really more from companies what's going on, what's happening with their businesses, what are their plans, how have they really been doing, which you don't necessarily always get when you just see the figures which are released by the stock exchange, for instance. So they really want deeper insight into what's happening. So by having reporters who are producing more of those stories, who are able to write about those things in greater depth and go along and speak to companies and things, is really able to present a much sort of better picture, a much broader picture of what's happening in this country than has been done before by an international agency in that way.
So why I want to ask a basic question. Why is Reuters interested in business news more than any aspect of journalism?
Well, a lot
look at, for example, now in Africa, I think one of the challenges in Africa is business. We're talking about health. We have issues of underdevelopment because of the health and poor health indices that we have. So why is it focusing more on business news? Is it because of the rest of the world?
A lot of our subscribers are very interested in business news. We cover all the subjects. We cover a full range of subjects. But our subscribers are particularly interested, are more and more interested in business news from Africa. When I reported from Nigeria, when I was based here in 1996 as a correspondent, there was a great deal of appetite. There's always been a lot of interest in the oil industry in Nigeria. There's always been a lot of interest in the politics in Nigeria. there's interest in what happens socially in Nigeria. But there wasn't nearly as much interest as there is now in what's happening in business, what's happening in finance, what's happening with the economy. And that's partly a factor of what's happened in Nigeria and partly a factor of what's happened in Africa and the rest of the world. I mean, there are a lot of different forces which have come together, which have helped to propel growth in the past few years, and where people see a great deal of growth in the future. Just last week I was up in Abuja and met some foreign fund managers who were there and so on, who are very interested in coming to Nigeria, but they need the information, they need to know what's going on. They're our subscribers too. We do supply news to all the major media in the world, but a lot of what we do is also providing decision makers in financial markets with the news that they need in real time to be able to make the judgments that they have to make and to drive those decisions. We cover all the subjects. We cover a full range of subjects. But our subscribers are particularly interested, are more and more interested in business news from Africa. When I reported from Nigeria, when I was based here in 1996 as a correspondent, there was a great deal of appetite. There's always been a lot of interest in the oil industry in Nigeria. There's always been a lot of interest in the politics in Nigeria. There's interest in what happens socially in Nigeria. But there wasn't nearly as much interest as there is now in what's happening in business, what's happening in finance, what's happening with the economy. And that's partly a factor of what's happened in Nigeria and partly a factor of what's happened in Africa and the rest of the world. I mean, there are a lot of different forces which have come together, which have helped to propel growth in the past few years, and where people see a great deal of growth in the future. Just last week I was up in Abuja and met some foreign fund managers who were there and so on, who are very interested in coming to Nigeria, but they need the information, they need to know what's going on. They're our subscribers too. We do supply news to all the major media in the world, but a lot of what we do is also providing decision makers in financial markets with the news that they need in real time to be able to make the judgments that they have to make and to drive those decisions.